Hey, everybody, welcome back to another Bald Movie. This week, Jim and I are talking about The Majestic, a 2001 romantic period piece directed by Frank Darabont, written by Michael Sloan, and starring Jim Carrey, among others. Now, you'll recognize Mr. Darabont's work if you don't recognize his name. Directed The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, The Mist, and for better or worse, he's responsible for AMC's The Walking Dead.
Let's say early The Walking Dead.
He helmed the entirety of season 1 and a little bit of season 2, and then he got sacked for wanting to make the show too good.
And then he sued him.
And then he sued him, and it's glorious. And 11 seasons later, he's still executive producer, cashing them checks. It was written by Michael Sloan, who has a very thin resume outside of this movie. But I also read that he was a high school friend of Frank Darabont, so there you go. Jim, it had been about 20 years. I saw this at the theater. I did not remember any of it. If I had remembered more of it, I wouldn't have selected this film because honestly, I'm trying to get away from talking about politics. And this film is fucking political. What'd you think?
I still really liked it. When I first saw it, it was about the same time that you saw it, and I was a big fan. I am kind of a sucker for these self-righteous speeches about freedoms and justice and things like that, and this movie has a really good one, even if it's a little silly in places, but I really appreciated that, and I liked there's something cheesy about the whole thing, and I definitely felt that on the second watch here, more than I did the first time. But there's also something like comforting about that innocence, especially in today's environment where you can just look at it and there's nothing there to really feel too bad about, which I'm kind of okay with right now.
Yeah. I think it's a great little film that tells the tale of a fictional version of America where bad people sometimes get away with tarnishing, if not outright destroying American ideals, but they're always defeated by well-meaning, good and decent people. It's very inspirational, aspirational, a bit heavy-handed and kind of vaguely naive in the same way that like The West Wing is and kind of was. It reminded me a lot of It's Wonderful, A Wonderful Life. About halfway point I put that in my notes. Like, this is so... He is Jim Carrey is so channeling Jimmy Stewart from A Wonderful Life, and then I read Roger Ebert's review, and he's explicitly comparing this to the work of Frank Capra. And like I said, it's funny because we didn't pick this film to be political. If the way we do this is we have this big spreadsheet of like the greatest movies in the past 40 years by box office and Oscar performance. We kind of randomly scroll through it and be like, what do you think about this? And when we both find one we agree, I think the hook on this one was like, we were talking about like the plight of movie theaters. Like I read an article where AMC's warning that they're not going to make it through this closure. And we're like, oh, let's pick a thing about, something about cinema in trouble and the resurrection of cinema. And we're like, The Majestic. And it's about the fucking commies and the Red Scare.
Sure is.
But it's also got just a terrific cast. You'll recognize a lot of Frank Darabont players. You got Jeffrey DeMunn, Laurie Holden. And I just think Frank Darabont is just so good at directing and tugging your emotions. There's a couple of things where I walked into some scenarios, arms crossed, openly skeptical. There's no fucking way you're going to pull off this and make me feel anything. And I ended up sobbing through two of them. And it also just, the look of this film, it's just perfect. It's a rock solid version of a colorized modern Frank Capra film that you'll ever see. Like the cars, Main Street, the costuming and dress, everything is just so meticulous to put you into this particular, again, lightly fictionalized American small town on the West Coast. Do you want to, I thought maybe we could, if people are like me and they'd forgotten the kind of general thrust of this film, we could do a little synopsis.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, The Majestic takes place in the early 1950s at the height of the Second Red Scare. An aspiring Hollywood writer, Pete, played by Jim Carrey, finds himself in the sights of the House Committee on Un-American Activities because he attended a socialist meeting in college because of a girl he was into. The studio is in an uproar and demands that he renounce his communism and name names of fellow communist sympathizers. He has no list of names, but that's fine because the committee's got a half dozen that they've come up with on their own. He just has to sign a statement and everything will be fine. His girlfriend leaves him, and distraught, he takes a long drive at night, loses control of his car, goes off a bridge. Next day, he wakes up on a beach, suffering complete amnesia. He's discovered by the folk of a small town who take him in and help him get back on his feet. Slowly, the town becomes convinced that Pete is in actuality Luke, a wholesome all-American type who they thought they lost in a battle in World War II. Soon, Pete is adopted by an entirely new family, including his father, who adores him, his ex-girlfriend, and the entire town is kind of revitalized by his miraculous return from the dead. Inspired by this, Luke's father announces he's going to resurrect the Majestic, the now dilapidated but formerly glorious theater that for many years was the beating heart of the town. But looming in the background is the question, will Pete regain his memories? And what will the town do when it finds its miracle is a misunderstanding? Let's talk about the movie. And from here on out, it's Spoilerville for this 20-year-old movie. Maybe a good place to start is the cast. You mentioned liking Jim Carrey. I do too. Talk about that.
Yeah, I think so. My love of Jim Carrey started with some of his now shittier movies. Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber. Dumb and Dumber's still okay. But
were you an In Living Color fan?
No, I was not a Fire Marshal Bill fan until after I had seen him in like Ace Ventura.
Yeah. I mean, In Living Color is now problematic as hell, but I really enjoyed watching it. And I was old enough that I had a TV in my room, and my mom would not approve of me watching it, but it was on kind of late, I think, of a weeknight, so I was able to watch it. And yeah, Fire Marshal Bill. I forget his Conan the Barbarian gender bent version of that. I enjoyed all that. And Ace Ventura, yeah, all of his dumb shit I really was a big fan of. Dumb and Dumber.
That was my start with Jim Carrey, but then I saw stuff like Eternal Sunshine, A Spotless Mind, Truman Show, even to a degree like 23 or whatever the hell that numerology film he did was. And I really started to appreciate him more as a dramatic actor. Man on the Moon,
yeah,
that was great. And I was surprised, and I actually became like a real fan of Jim Carrey's. And you know, in later years, I've fallen off that for various reasons.
Well, here's a reason. I think that had it not been for what seems like a severe mental illness that he's battled throughout most of his career, he might be a Tom Hanks type.
Yeah, he could. Comedy, drama, does it all.
Yeah, he'd just be like this generation's, or I guess Tom Hanks is still around. He's still making movies, still awesome. But he could be the Gen X or even a millennial version of Tom Hanks. But the man's got a lot of struggles. If you've seen the documentary, what was that? Something in Me, Andy and Me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's and in his public statements, he doesn't make any bones about it. That like he has a lot of struggles with depression and anxiety and maybe even more diagnosable things. But he did have a really, really successful run of both comedy and drama, and then a lot of nothing. He was in the new. I hear he's really good in the new Sonic. For what it's
as
worth,
Dr. Robotnik, sure.
Yeah,
I haven't seen him in that yet.
No, I probably won't. Everyone tells me that Sonic is good, but I'm just like, is it though? Is it really? Yeah. But Jim Carrey is amazing in this movie. This movie's not funny. There is some lightly comedic parts.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the everything about the small town politics, the obsession over Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay.
And Jeffrey DeMunn kind of presiding over all that, and he does really well with that. But he's just solid. He's just like Jimmy Stewart, just like Tom Hanks. He disappears in the role and does what you need him to do. Jerks to tears, provokes to laughter.
And I think maybe that's the most amazing accomplishment of Jim Carrey is that he could disappear into any role after Ace Ventura.
Yeah.
Like, because it's such a standout, like, this is a thing that he is. He's a funny man who does weird faces.
Yep.
And then he goes from that into these dramatic roles. And yeah, you do sort of lose him in those characters.
Indeed. I want to talk about Martin Landau, who does just a lot of interesting, really great work. I thought this was particularly amazing casting because there's several times in the movie. So Martin Landau is his adoptive father. He thinks he's Jim Carrey's Luke, his son that's returned miraculously from the dead in World War II. And he's got this. There's a couple points in the movie where he and Jim Carrey stand side by side with like a big toothy grin on their face, and like I feel like he's cast for that alone because when they both smile like that, they both have this enormous toothy grin, and there's a clear family resemblance. And it's very touching their relationship. This old man, there's a lot that they give Martin Landau a lot of great scenes. Like there's that scene where Luke he first thinks Luke's come back, and he's got the gold star that he's displayed proudly in the theater as it collapses around him and his son's picture. And he takes that down, and then there's some shit that shouldn't work. Like when he goes to the graveyard to show, this town, the town setting is amazing too. You've got the small town that's lost like 60 kids in World War II, and they're all kind of like this pall cast over the town. And the few that returned are maimed. They got like, what's that guy name? Was it Billy or Joe?
Bob.
Bob. He's got the hook arm now.
Yeah.
And he takes him there, and you find out that not only is Luke a war hero, he's got the Congressional Medal of Honor. And Martin Landau's going to get this out of the grave that's got this little glass shrine of all these Medal of Honor. He's going to pin it and I'm just like, there's no fucking way this is going to work, but it kind of does. And it's all because Martin Landau and Jim Carrey are amazing.
Yeah, they are. And I don't know. I won't talk spoilers quite yet, but
really? Okay.
There are a few scenes that I want to talk about with them that really worked for me and maybe shouldn't have because they're so cheesy. But yeah.
What'd you think of Laurie Holden? Because as soon as she showed up, I wrote, very excited to see what the ugliest crier in the known world is going to do with this little bit of melodrama. Because
I thought she was fantastic.
Me too. I've actually liked her in everything that I've ever seen her in except for the fucking Walking Dead.
She has a completely different demeanor in this. Like, it shows what a good actress she is because, like, in The Walking Dead, she's this very harsh, stern character. Sort of, no soft edges. In this, she's very different. She has a little bit of that, what's her name? Andrea quality to her in a couple of scenes, but there's a softness, there's a warmth underneath it all. That like a foundational warmth in this character that does not come through in The Walking Dead. That here she's able to effortlessly display, and she has almost a completely different voice in this too. Like it's not just the accent, it's the tone of it, it's the timbre of it. It's
sure.
I was actually really surprised by how different her performance is here than in anything else I've seen her in.
Yeah, and she's impressive as a character point because she hasn't just been sitting and mourning her dead fiance. She's gone out and gone apparently to law school, and she passes the bar. She becomes a lawyer in this movie. Pretty fucking impressive for a gal from small town America in the early 50s.
Yeah.
But she's amazing. There's like and she's her and Jim Carrey are a very cute couple. That part where they go to like this town festival and she's got this fantastic red dress on. Again, like that part where they had a lighthouse and she comes down with like this incurable case of the hiccups, and I'm like, oh fuck this movie. What the hell?
I was 100% fuck this movie right there. It never won me over. That gimmick felt to me like the bullshit gimmicks of the dog running up the hill to ring the bell that they talk about in the beginning of the movie.
Right.
I was like, this is bullshit.
The hiccups never come back either.
You're right. There's that one scene where they make a big deal about it.
I wonder, when I was thinking about after this movie, I was wondering because they make it a point that she kind of goes along with the delusion. In fact, that's the whole town kind of like knows that this isn't real, but wouldn't it be cool? Like, everyone's kind of skeptical, but like, man, wouldn't it be amazing if?
Yeah, it's a story of hope.
And I wonder if like the hiccups was her little addition to the fiction that made things work. Because it never ever comes up again. It's like she just wanted an excuse to kiss him and see if it was real, and right.
So these are like psychosomatic hiccups that she blames on one thing, which is like when she gets flustered or feels like a strong emotion or something. I couldn't tell exactly what triggered the hiccups in the story of the movie, but you're saying the psychosomatic thing is actually something entirely different, where she needs Luke to be Luke because the town wants Luke to be Luke.
And she wants Luke to be
Luke. And she's
Luke.
Playing along with it?
Yeah, she wants this to happen as bad as anybody does. And
I think so, yeah.
And so like she invents the excuse, the thing to get the kiss going, so...
Huh.
But I don't know. It's a wild kind of shared delusion that the whole movie's got. Did you see who played the actual Luke?
I did, and I think it was a mistake.
Was it? Okay, because I was
Yeah.
delighted to find out it was Matt Damon.
I mean, it's cool, but I immediately recognized his voice, and all I could see in my head is Matt Damon's face, and those two people look nothing alike. Jim Carrey looks nothing like Matt Damon. There's no way the photo that they show of Luke Trimble is a photo of Matt Damon in any world.
Yeah, but like, was Matt Damon back in 2001?
I
Like
think
that's
he
only
was pretty Matt Damon.
That was only 4 years after the Goodwill Hunting. Because to me,
I mean, he blew up in Good Will Hunting.
he blew up in Goodwill Hunting. Then he had Talented Mr. Ripley. He had Saving Private Ryan, where he was a bit player.
Yeah.
I guess the same year Ocean's 11 came out. That because like Ocean's 11 and The Bourne Identity is when he went to like super duper star. So I'm like, he's a character actor at this point. And he's playing a young All-American. Like, if you're looking for a young All-American man, I know. Let's get Matt Damon. But yeah, he doesn't look anything like.
Well.
Yeah, he did.
Age well.
They don't look alike. But I don't know. I thought that was cute. Let's talk about a little bit about the filmmaking. There's a lot of really fun.
Well, you missed a couple of people that I wanted to note real quick.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of Walking Dead, you've got Cliff Curtis as the evil but handsome Prince Khalid, I think.
I was about to mention this whole fake Hollywood film that's got him and Bruce Campbell. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bruce Campbell is the role in The Intrepid Explorer. Did you recognize Sean Doyle?
Who's Sean Doyle?
He's Federal Agent Saunders. You might know him better as Aaron Wright from The Expanse.
Yes, I was wondering who the hell that was, and I looked up almost everyone, but I forgot to make a note of that. Yes, playing a officious son of a bitch in both roles.
Mm-hmm. Those are the only notes I wanted to make on cast.
Okay, so pivoting to the filmmaking, a lot of the fun in this film is kind of like this love letter to Hollywood filmmaking, and kind of poking fun at it too. Like you can tell that Darabont has his opinions on Hollywood producers and their interference. And I think it's super fun to think about this in terms of like The Walking Dead and what a fucking debacle that had to have been. Like the AMC guys like interfering and cutting the budget and, you know, you made a pretty good show, 6 episodes with X amount of dollars. How about you make 16 of them for the same amount of money? And he's like, no, well, you're fired. But I really liked they had a lot of real movies that they reference and have like, American in Paris and whatnot, but they had also the Sand Pirates of the Sahara or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I just really liked Bruce Campbell swashbuckling against Cliff Curtis. It was a lot of fun. Did you see the Indiana Jones gold idol pop up?
I didn't see the idol, but I couldn't help but think Indiana Jones during this entire movie.
Yeah, that one that the Indiana gets in the very beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah,
the one he swaps with the back. They were fighting over that at one point. That was that was pretty cute. The scene that really evoked The Wonderful Life the most, or the one I first thought about it, is the scene of him drowning. I thought that was incredibly well staged and dramatic. Yeah.
Absolutely it was, and it's kind of everything building up to that. Like there's one shot when he's got this monkey and he's coming out of the bar and he gets in his car and they're showing kind of a reverse angle up at Jim Carrey and the moon's in the back and everything else is just completely black, and it felt like one of those old Hollywood films. There was something magical about it, about that moment, and it's a dark moment, you know. Yeah. He's about to potentially go commit suicide, but I really thought they've nailed the feel of like a Frank Capra film.
Oh yeah, and like even the setting where we talked about this a little bit, but that town, you know, I'm thinking about like because it's not. When I drive through small town Ohio, a lot of these towns are doing this thing where they've lost a couple of kids in the recent adventurism over in the Middle East, and you see their portraits hanging in the town square, and then some of them have gone to where like every person that's been killed in war in the last 100 years, they start hanging up their photos. But I was thinking of like if my hometown of like 60 kids out of the graduating class were just dead, like what a pall that would cast. And I don't know if any town, like if that's based on any real story, but like there's a couple of like really moving moments where like the town comes together and they're so beat down that one of them returning from the dead it kind of gives everyone a shot in the arm. There's a couple of realistic, like some people have like reverse survivor's guilt. Like, 59 of these guys didn't come home. This one guy comes home, like, fuck him. That's Bob. Or did you say Billy?
Yeah, no, it's
It's
Bob.
Bob.
I was surprised, like how shitty the town treats him. Like it's amazing when Luke comes back and he's got this fucking literal parade
Uh-huh.
of people lifting him up on their shoulders and marching him through the town square and playing big band songs and organizing meetings and getting together in the diner to tell him how amazing he is. Bob's standing there with no arm, having come back from the war, and everybody's treating him like shit. I get that he's a little busted, and not physically, emotionally, but man, I bet the town doesn't seem to have given him much in the way of support during his time after the war.
Well, he's part of the Paul, because the way I interpreted that is like even though he's alive, he still is representing of everything they lost. Like he's the living embodiment,
Sure.
Loss of innocence, loss of his arm. And he's kind of this grim reminder that walks around reminding them, oh my God, I lost my son. And whereas Luke's the opposite. Luke is like hope rekindled. Luke is, like fucking the resurrection and the life. He's like,
Man.
promises of Jesus fulfilled right there in the middle of small town America.
Yeah, I feel like it's a matter of perspective. Like,
oh yeah,
what they should have said about Bob is he came home, he's persevering despite his injuries. There's a lot of hope there too. And if they had maybe shown him a little more support, maybe given him a parade for having come back, he might be an entirely different person. And this town might be an entirely different town.
Yes. But it did leave, I thought there was a lot of really great scenes where like, the town's too depressed to like even go through with the war memorial that they planned. And, Jim Carrey turns that around. They had a really nice moving ceremony where everybody who lost someone came and was honored in town. I thought that was really great. There's a couple interesting things about television versus movie that haven't aged very well. Like Martin Landau's character gets up and gives this stirring speech, like, because the Majestic is amazing. It's a magical place. I wish my town had one. I think that the Alamo Draft House, if your town is lucky enough to have one, is kind of similar to what this might have meant or felt in the 20s and 30s. But like when he's sitting like, why would anyone watch a little box? Just because it's convenient? Because you don't have to get dressed up? Because you can just sit there alone in your living room without other people around? I'm like, making a real strong argument for TV here, Martin. I'm not seeing the downside. But then again, a quintessential movie experience where the crowd is appropriate, respectful during the quiet parts and loud and raucous during the cheering parts is, I was thinking Avengers Endgame. I would not want to watch that for the first time in a sterile living room. I'm glad I was there to hear everybody cheer and whoop and yell and
or any Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
Any big movie. And that's the thing. Like, you got to remember also in the 50s, television looked like shit. Mm-hmm. It was, I believe it was still black and white back then.
Yeah.
And yeah, you wouldn't get the same experience even from just a film perspective. Like, it wouldn't look as good at home.
Yeah. No.
Nowadays we have, 60-inch screens where you can essentially get the same picture if you sit close enough, and there's no difference. Sound systems are great at home.
And zero chance of assholes that, you can't throw out of your own house if they if they exist.
Make your own popcorn.
Yeah, make your own popcorn. Don't pay $5-6 for it. I thought this film
also the hilarious thing. Well, okay, so it's hilarious, and it's also I could see a certain sentimentality for this. If you didn't want to see the one movie the Majestic was playing for the multiple weeks that it was playing it, you were kind of screwed on seeing movies, because that was the only theater in town and it only had one house. So that was all it was playing for like a month. And there's a certain like community, I think, that would develop around that naturally, right? Like everybody has seen the same film in the town. Yeah. And so everybody has these touchstones of like pop culture that bring people together,
Yeah. There's a couple of other things I thought were really smart about the way the plot functioned, because this could have, this is pretty melodramatic, pretty maudlin, pretty saccharine, but it could have gone like ridiculously so. But like a couple things, like amnesia. I don't know if it's a thing, but it's a well-worn movie trope, and it works pretty well here. And I just thought that like this is the one point where I buy that this guy Pete just goes along with it, because why wouldn't he? Why would he ever question the nature of his reality? Like he's stepping in the shoes of like an idolized hero. He's got a beautiful ex-girlfriend who's been carrying a torch for him the whole time. He's got a loving father who did a good job raising him, instilling values. He's beloved by the community. Like and he's a stand-up guy, because when he starts having memories of his former life, he fesses up to them almost immediately. With one, and that's the thing. Like, when it became clear that he was going to remember who he was in the exact same scene that his dad has a heart attack and dies, I'm like, there's no fucking way this is going to be emotionally resonant. But it was, I don't know, it was beautiful, because he almost told the truth right then and there. And then he quickly did the moral calculus and was like, there's no good to come of,
I'm so happy he didn't tell him.
Yeah, and I even thought he covered it well. Like, Dad, I'm not. And then he pauses. It's like, I'm not ready to let you go. And then I'm like, oh God, I'm a mess now. Jim Carrey's jerking to tears.
Yeah, it is a great scene. I like the scene where he tells Adele, the truth as well, because he's not caught yet. But he wants to get out ahead of this, as he should, and not for some like, strategic calculus, right? It's just like, well, this is the thing I need to do because this is the honest thing. And it's interesting to me because she says, I knew, and somehow I always knew you're so much like him, though. And I couldn't help but think, like, why is he so much like him? Is it just a circumstance of fate, or was the town basically grooming him the entire time into the Luke Trimble that they remembered? Because he sort of started with this blank slate at the beginning, and we know he's a very different person at the beginning of the movie before he has his accident. So it was interesting to me, like, that cause and effect there.
Yeah, and I like they had you see the picture of the guy, and he superficially resembles Jim Carrey, maybe a little bit fuller in the face. Yeah. But I was thinking though throughout the movie, like, I guess if you hadn't seen him and you hadn't seen recent pictures, and people change and all this, but like I thought the movie does smart things. Like they have his future father-in-law kind of like in a half point in the movie take someone aside and say, yeah, I love this too, this is great, it feels good, but like, even if he is who we think he is, he's been gone 10 years. What's he been doing? What life has he had? Like the movie isn't stupid. It asks the questions, but it paints a picture of like people going along with this because it's so happy. It's making everyone feel so good. And even, like you said, when Laurie's Adele character, that felt right when she says, I deep down always knew. You look like him, but you're not him, and this and that and the other. And so a lesser movie would have turned this into a big bitter acrimony, like, how dare you mislead me, and I can't believe you played me for a fool, and I feel, but like, it was a very, she's not an 18-year-old girl, she's like in her 30s at this point, she's got a career, she's been through school, she took it in stride. I mean, she was appropriately like devastated and hurt, but she knew it wasn't Pete's fault. I thought that scene was great, and also, Darabont could have had Laurie Holden a ugly cry, snot bubbles, blood vessels bursting in her face, and they played it. They brought it back a little bit. No need for Walking Dead style overacting. You just do what you need to do.
I will say it kind of sucks when everyone finds out that he's not Luke and they immediately turn on him, because he is Luke for all intents and purposes. Like I said, they've groomed him to be Luke, and he's done all these amazing things for the town, right? There's this symbiosis between Luke and the town, between Peter Appleton and the town, where Peter becomes a better person because of them. They become a better town because of him, regardless of his true identity. And they just turn on him on a dime when they find out that this man who clearly was not deceiving them, They pushed him every step of the way. They were pushing him to be Luke, right? And every step he was saying, look, I'm not sure about this. I don't know if I'm this guy. They wanted so desperately for him to be Luke that when they turned on him at the end, I felt a little disgusted by it.
Yeah, but I thought I did too, and but then I started as I was watching. I think the film again, the screenplay does another smart thing where the people that were the most disappointed in him were like largely the hangers on. You know, like the people that were really important to him, his father, the
Hmm.
usher, Adele, they were, you know, like they all confessed, like, well, not the dad because he died, but like those people
Yeah.
central to his life said, you know, we always knew this and we always hoped, but you know, like they weren't mean to him and they didn't run him off. The rest of the town, like, because that's like all he was to them was a symbol, and as soon
Yeah.
as that
Yeah.
symbol was destroyed, then I mean, they didn't run him out of town, right? They just like it's no longer fun to go to the Majestic and pretend like we're a town of the 1930s anymore because we're a
Hmm.
town of the 50s and all of us have lost people and they're not coming back.
And I think at
So
that moment, the rest of the town is unsure because they don't have this relationship, this deep relationship with him, like Adele or any of the other people in the Majestic do, where they're unsure if he is actually going to uphold the values that Luke did, right? And so
yeah,
when he comes back after having given this blistering speech to Congress or this committee, whatever it is,
yeah,
um, he comes back and he's greeted with open arms by everyone, and I think
yeah,
that's important.
because he did right by Luke's legacy and Luke's memory.
Yeah.
Which maybe this is a good time to transition to the political side of this.
Okay.
Unless you want to praise more of the filmmaking, because again, you could. This thing is shot amazingly. The colors really pop. The way they light the Majestic just makes it look like this magical portal. And I just can't say enough about the reveal because the way it was synchronized with the film and the music swelling coming from the film and what was happening on the screen and how that dovetailed into his realization and his father died, like that just worked. If anything had been anything but excellent, that scene would have been ridiculous, but they knocked it out of the park.
And then the
uh
theater itself reflects all that, right? Like if you look at
yeah,
the state of it, look at the state of the Majestic, look at the state of Harry Trimble, look at the state of the town at the beginning of this. And when Luke comes in and they get a glimmer of hope and they start fixing up the Majestic, by the end of that, you have sort of this. There's a one-to-one connection between Luke, or I guess Peter Appleton's memory, and this theater's restoration, which kind of ends up working out in a weird way where it's sort of like exactly the opposite of what they wanted it to happen. They
uh-huh
wanted him to remember his life with them. Instead, he remembers the other life. But the town comes back to life as the Majestic does. And I think, all this stuff is so like cheesy if it were less well constructed. But I thought it really worked in this movie.
oh I agree. All right, so I think this is a good point though where we can pivot to the political. There's a couple. I don't have a lot to say because the overt commentary is extremely overt.
Yeah.
It's so funny to watch. Not funny, I guess funny in like a black comedy kind of way. Roger Ebert's review, where this movie came out in the wake of 9/11, and the country was preoccupied, I guess, or like the liberals were preoccupied in the country about the extrajudicial trials of terrorists and whatnot, and how kind of like quaint concerns like that seem in the backdrop of current American politics.
Yeah, as our country tears itself apart.
Yeah, like the thing is like this stuff and like the West Wing and the it feels ahistoric that I don't think this America existed anywhere. If it did, we wouldn't have the problems that we do. Like, one of the reasons there's so much racial animosity is this country's just never stopped hating black people, and then it found more new people to hate. And the only people that ever kind of reconciled with is like, I talk over on the Swissbold side, like, German Americans, Italian Americans, Irish Americans eventually can become cool to America because they just blend in. But if you got
Mhm.
any pigment to it, you're fucked because you're always going to be different than other. Like if we at various points in history, like after World War One, after World War Two, where like black soldiers served with distinction, if we're ever like, you know what, hey, we were wrong about these folks. They can be just as valiant and heroic and patriotic as anybody else. We probably wouldn't have the continued racial animosity, but we can't for whatever reason. So like when I see this small town American and they're like, it's also funny that like you could provide for a family as an usher at a theater. How about that for like a could you is like
I doubt it.
And then I see stuff like whenever I was watching Mad Men in like the early seasons, they had an elevator operator. You know, like his whole job was to push buttons for people because God help us if people push their own buttons. Like
Yeah.
I presume that person provided for a family with that career. But it's gone. Did it ever exist? And you know you've got this soaring speech. This is Mr. Smith goes to Washington, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to assert my Fifth Amendment rights. I'm going to assert my First Amendment rights to say whatever the fuck I want because this is America. And
Yeah.
is this
And
I was gonna
what's
say,
that?
is this alternative history porn good?
No, I mean it's never good. Like I don't like trying to misinterpret history. But it's certainly something that everyone does to a degree, right? I mean, even in your own memories of your own history, you sort of recontextualize things as you age and gain more perspective. So I don't know if it's like intentionally damaging or if it's something that just happens.
I just feel like sometimes because I remember for example, we watched The Post, right? Like so this was like early on in the Trump administration, and it seemed like the moral of that movie was if you read newspapers and you hold your government accountable, the institutions will not fail you. And 3 years later, the institutions largely have failed us.
Mhm.
I just because sometimes I think that
Well, we're certainly not holding them accountable. Like I
well
would say, we haven't done any of the things that some of those films advocate for.
yeah, because like the Post literally is not ahistorical. It's actually a depiction of what happened. But
Hmm.
I don't know because sometimes like if this Majestic kind of gives us a false sense of security that like America's better than we not only better than we remember but better than it ever was, and like regardless of like when all people have to do to change the course of history is give an impassioned speech, and then people of good character and goodwill and open hearts and charity will support them and you'll carry the day. I still believe like I remember also going back to a bygone era when where we did that Christmas time review of It's a Wonderful Life. Like I said, yeah, I wish there was more aspirational films like this. But we have these films. I forgot about how good that The Majestic was, and it came at just the right time when the next round of civil liberties that we had were being jeopardized. They're not. They're certainly are. They're not a vaccine like would hope they would be. You know.
Yeah, I agree. Like there's no easy vaccine. The cost of liberty and justice is ever forever being vigilant. So like you're going to see these movies all the time, but you're also going to see counterexamples. I think like that's kind of why I like these movies is because of the aspirational nature of them. Like
Mhm.
I watch a lot of movies and a lot of media. You go on social media, you go on any news site, and you can see all the bad shit that's happening. You can see all the reasons that you should feel really shitty about the current state of things.
Yeah.
And I don't know that movies like this try and sort of plaster over that and hide it. I think what they're doing is saying there's another way. We don't have to operate in the modes that we're operating in. We can choose something better for ourselves. And it takes people like a Peter Appleton changing their mind, standing up for what's right. And yes, it's a fairy tale in that you can get up in front of this committee and make a speech and suddenly everything is cool for everybody around the world. But at the same time, if everybody were doing these things and everybody felt that way, we'd be a lot better off.
No, I
So I don't know. There's something hopeful about it.
no, and I think
These types of
that's
movies,
because the opposite is just you give in to despair and apathy, and that just
and
if
it's so easy to do that.
yeah, yeah. So I think on in balance, these types of movies are good. But you also got to realize they're not, like President Bartlett was not a real person. Uh,
Hmm.
his policies weren't real. His cabinet wasn't real. His administration wasn't real. Jim Carrey wasn't a war hero. He didn't destroy McCarthyism with a fiery speech in front of Congress. But it'd be nice if he was. And what can we do ourselves as citizens to kind of be the Jim Carrey we want to see in the world? So yeah, I think you're right. It is good. It's just it's a trip to watch stuff like this, or It's a Wonderful Life in view of modern political debate, and think, Jesus, what happened? Because it does seem it felt like such a great capture of that Capra feeling, because you had these guys, I don't know what it is, they call them the greatest generation. These men and women, they come back from overseas and they're just determined to make the world a better place. Probably because of the horrific experiences in war and seeing how bad things can get if you let things get off the rails.
Yeah, I do think there's nothing better than a speech that puts powerful villains in their place.
Yeah.
But also, it's a little silly to be reading from the Constitution, literally reading the First Amendment. When, to these people who are legal scholars, come on.
Especially since it's a 5-minute speech in which the chairman of the House on Un-American Activities Committee is just banging the gavel, out of order, remove this man from the that. All
the bailiffs are out on lunch apparently.
Yeah, that shit would have been shut down so fast. He wouldn't have gotten through the first 3 words of the First Amendment. Congress shall establish, now get him out of here. Yeah. So and then the one guy's like, "Oh no, let him talk. This is great for us." Like, come on, man.
It's so cheesy. It's real dumb, but it's inspiring.
Yeah, and it was also some funny moments too. I liked his horniness defense. Yeah, it's perfectly cromulent defense to being accused of being a communist, which, as Roger Ebert pointed out, wasn't against the law either. So.
Apparently he wasn't a communist, was he? He was a socialist.
No, I don't.
Confusing.
I don't even think he was that. Well, I think he was just.
Yeah, he wasn't. But the meeting he went to was, right.
Yeah.
Which don't get us started about confusing communism and socialism.
Sure. It's interesting, the framing device where, like, the first of the movie, it's like he's. I wish they did something more with that. Because I thought, like, it would have been cool. I don't know, maybe this is even stupider, but I thought or more stupid, excuse me. I thought it'd been cool if at the end, where he's, these executives are making this lurid pitch for his movie, if he would have, like, you understand that he was going to come in and say, tell the story he just went through, because it's kind of unbelievable, has wild details, but I don't know. Then the movie's already. Do you think this movie is too long?
No, I don't.
And
as a matter of fact, I quite respect it for not wasting my time, because there's a large chunk of this movie where we're just focused on the town.
Mm-hmm.
And the communist stuff just completely falls off the radar for like an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's perfectly appropriate. There was nothing to do in that. All they needed to do was say, okay, they're going to find him eventually.
Yeah.
Throw 1 or 2 clues in there where they trace him down, and you get the whole story.
And they did that. Like, I that's the other smart thing, is they had the FBI kind of like as this constant menace. Like, you went through you had this whole hour you were set in the town, but like every 15 minutes on an upbeat, you'd cut to the sinister agents, like looking at death certificates or looking at, uncovering. You did have a headline about the Hollywood commie hot on the trails or whatever.
Inside the town though, right? Like the newspapers and stuff. You'd be seeing the articles there, yeah. But they don't really cut back to the chase very often.
Yeah. It's just enough to keep the tension. Like there's this undercurrent of tension, and Darabont does that really well too. Like, I've always been amazed at, like, the Green Mile, how you got the central thread of like this like this supernatural thing happening, but then you've also got long 30-minute stretches of just like prison life, or the relationship between a guard and his wife, or same thing with Shawshank. Like, that was a movie about a man escaping from prison, but that's just scratching the surface of what it was about. He's a really damn good visual storyteller. I appreciate his work. Do you have anything more you want to say about the Majestic?
I got 2 just silly points that I noticed.
Hit me with them.
So Jim Carrey decides he's going to fix up the Majestic, and the first thing he's going to do is haul this monument that I want to say Roosevelt gave to the town.
Yeah.
After 60 of their kids died.
The fallen soldier monument.
And he takes them down. He takes everybody down in the basement, the oldest men in town, the oldest ones he can find. And he uncovers it, and he says, hey, Harry, grab the other end. And I'm like, of a 2-ton solid bronze statue. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to lift it out of what? How did it get down there in the first place? I didn't see any doors big enough for this thing. They crawled in through a fucking window. I just couldn't believe that he asked these old guys to pick up the other end of this, like they're going to haul it out themselves.
I thought when that was happening that the gag was going to be they're going to melt that down and use it to rebuild the Majestic. Like, like this town is like hidden in something shameful. And then I'm like, how are they going to square that?
Yeah,
and especially since the next scene, you see Jim Carrey swinging off this gleaming metal skeleton of the Majestic they've just welded. I'm like, well, there you go. They've melted it down and they've recast it. And then I was actually genuinely surprised and shocked when it turned up later in the film. All right, that's point one.
The other crazy thing to me is like this celebration that they have where, he tries to play the piano and all he can play is this ragtime or whatever that Emmett's taught him. It supposedly taught him, right?
Yeah.
When he starts playing that ragtime, suddenly everyone in the town is a really good swing dancer. Like,
sure.
500 young couples come out of the wings. I don't know where they're getting all these young men that they've lost so many of, but 500 young couples come out. They're dancing. They're jumping on tables. They're swinging each other over their shoulders and under their legs. It's it's
American Bandstand that just breaks out. Yeah.
In this small town, everybody's a skilled swing dancer.
It's what the devil's music does to you, Jim. I thought, okay, point 2B, the fact that you can play piano that skillfully in a certain style, but like Gershwin, you can't even follow along the notes when someone's playing them one by one, that seemed kind of weird too. Like, for example,
I would have liked to see another try at it after he's playing his ragtime stuff.
Yeah, like James Hetfield.
Give him another go.
Guitarist in Metallica, shreds, but he's also a classically trained guitarist. He can play that Spanish flamenco stuff and all that really complicated stuff. I just feel like it's one thing if like I've never got past just plucking at a guitar. I can play a few songs like if you asked me to play, but if I was like a lead, concert guitarist or pianist, like I think I could play ragtime and Gershwin and Chopin and it's like it's just weird that he could only play very complicated, fast-paced jazz.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like Marty McFly when he went to the undersea dance or whatever, he was able to play the slow stuff, right? He wasn't just like, what is this? What? I don't understand what these notes and chords are.
Yeah, if you could identify chords and no progressions, you're good.
Yeah, I would think. Again, if you're as proficient as Jim Carrey was in this movie. Well, all right, that wraps up our thoughts on The Majestic. We're going to be back next week with also 2001, Vanilla Sky, which I've actually not seen, but Jim says touches on a lot of kind of virtual reality, is something real. It's not kind of the Westworld vibes that we've been dealing with. We thought there might be some good synergy there. So we're going to come back next week with our thoughts on Vanilla Sky. I'm very excited. I'm loosely aware of what this movie's about. Actually, I'm not, because I had no idea it was like science fiction at all. I just know that Tom Cruise's face gets fucked up at some point.
It does.
So yeah, we'll be back next week to talk about Vanilla Sky. Hopefully you got enough time that you can give it a rewatch or maybe your first watch and discuss it along with us. Until then, I'm your host, A.Ron.
And I'm Jim.
See you next week.